We all have this idea of the classic storybook, right? Well, today we're going to look at the pages that were torn out a long, long time ago.
These names are practically part of our DNA. They conjure up images of enchanted castles, fairy godmothers, and of course, happily ever afters. They feel, well, they feel safe, familiar, comfortable.
Because the original tales, the ones collected by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, they weren't actually meant to comfort anyone. They were meant to warn. And they are soaked in a kind of darkness we've almost completely forgotten.
All right, so let's get into it. Here's our plan. First, we'll look at just how big the Grimm's collection really is. Then, we'll dive into the terrifying bargains that are at the heart of so many of these stories. After that, we'll explore their unique form of justice, check out some tales that are just plain bizarre, and then try to figure out what was the point of all this fear.
So the first thing you really have to understand is that the dozen or so stories we all know and love are just the tiny, shiny tip of a very large and very strange iceberg. The Grimm brothers weren't just making up stories for kids. They were folklorists, trying to preserve an ancient oral tradition.
Their collection, which was called Children's and Household Tales, has more than 200 stories in its final version. And, most of them have been totally forgotten by popular culture. And honestly, it's for a very good reason. They are deeply unsettling, incredibly violent, and the line between good and evil is blurry at best.
I mean, just listen to some of these titles. The Robber Bridegroom. That's a story where a young woman finds out her fiancé is actually a cannibal who murders and eats his brides. Or Fitcher's Bird, which has a sorcerer who keeps a locked room just filled with the dismembered bodies of women. Yeah, this is the world we're stepping into.
As you go through these tales, you start to see this theme over and over again. The terrible, terrible price of a wish. You have all these characters backed into a corner by poverty or just pure terror, and they make these deals with forces they can't possibly understand. And the consequences? They're always devastating. We all know the story of Rapunzel, but we tend to forget the absolute desperation that kicks it all off. Her father is terrified. He's been caught stealing from a powerful enchantress's garden, and to save his own skin, he agrees to give away his unborn child. And what's so chilling about this quote is the enchantress's tone. It's not cartoonishly evil, is it? It sounds reasonable, almost kind, which somehow makes it 100 times more horrifying.
Now this one is fascinating. It's from a story called Godfather Death. A poor man has 12 kids, and now a 13th is on the way, so he needs a godfather. First, he turns down God for, as he says, being unjust to the poor. Then he refuses the devil for being a liar. So who's left? He chooses death. Why? Because in his words, death maketh all equal. It's a terrifyingly practical choice in a world that feels completely unfair.
This bargain is just pure tragedy. You have a merchant who's lost everything. He makes this deal with a dwarf, and he's thinking, okay, my dog always greets me first. It'll be the dog. He gets home, he's rich again, but the first thing to run up and rub against his leg is his own son. The dwarf comes back 12 years later to collect.
So if you break a promise or you commit a crime in the world of Grimm, you don't get a trial. There are no second chances. This isn't about rehabilitation. It's about violent, often supernatural revenge. And this isn't just in the forgotten tales. Think about Cinderella's stepsisters. To make that glass slipper fit, one of them literally cuts off her own toe. The other slices off her heel. And what's their reward? At the wedding, doves fly down from the sky and peck out both of their eyes. Or Snow White's evil queen. She isn't just defeated, no. She's forced to wear red-hot iron shoes and dance until she literally drops dead. This just shows you how completely out of proportion everything is. The punishment almost never fits the crime. It grotesquely outweighs it. So for the crime of being selfish, of not sharing a loaf of bread, an entire family is just annihilated in the most horrific way you can imagine. It's not justice, it's a curse.
And it just keeps escalating. In the knapsack, the hat, and the horn, a soldier is betrayed by his wife, who's a princess, so he finds a magic horn that can destroy cities. Does he just go and punish her? Oh no, he blows that horn until every single wall, town, and village in the kingdom has crumbled to dust, crushing the king and princess to death. The message here is crystal clear: vengeance is absolute.
And this brutal code of honor, it even extends to the animal kingdom. In Old Sultan, a wolf helps a dog keep his job. But when the dog goes back on his part of the deal, the wolf feels betrayed. He doesn't just shrug it off. He promises violent revenge, you see? Even out here, promises are everything, and breaking them has deadly consequences.
Okay, so beyond all the grim morality lessons, there's this whole other category of tales. Stories that are just so strange, so nonsensical, they read like fever dreams. They don't really seem to have a moral at all. They're just weird.
So let's take a look at what might be one of the shortest and, without a doubt, one of the strangest stories in the entire collection.
So here are our heroes. You have a straw, a coal, and a bean. They've all just narrowly escaped certain death in a kitchen, they're overjoyed, they form a friendship, and they decide to travel the world together. An unlikely band of survivors, right? Setting off on a grand adventure. What could possibly go wrong?
Well, everything. They get to a little stream, and the straw lays himself across it to act as a bridge. The coal starts to cross, gets scared halfway, and just stops, burning right through the straw. They both fall into the water, the coal sizzles and dies. The bean, who's been watching all this, starts laughing so hard that it bursts. Luckily, there's a tailor nearby who sews it back up, but he only has black thread, which is why, to this day, all beans have a black seam. And that's it. That's the end of the story.
The absurdity just keeps getting cranked up. In another story, a hen starts choking, the cock runs to get water, which sets off this absolutely bizarre chain reaction. The stream won't give him water unless he gets red silk from a bride, the bride won't give him the silk unless she gets a wreath from a willow, and on it goes. By the time the cock finally gets back, the hen is dead. The story ends with a funeral procession where 6 mice, a fox, a wolf, and a bear all manage to drown themselves, and then the cock just dies of grief. The moral? Who knows?
So after all of these cruel bargains, these merciless punishments, and these surrealist tragedies, what are we supposed to take away from all this? What is the legacy of this Grimm that we forgot?
Well, one thing's for sure, these aren't fairy tales meant to soothe children. They are windows into a world that was incredibly harsh, totally unpredictable, and often just plain cruel. A world where famine, disease, and violence were real, everyday threats. These stories weren't made to tuck kids into bed, they were made to keep them awake, to warn them that the world right outside their door was full of wolves, both the literal and the humankind.
And this quote back from Godfather Death, it really sums up the whole worldview perfectly. In a life that is fundamentally unjust, where the rich get richer and the poor starve, death is the only thing that's truly fair, the only impartial force. It's a deeply cynical worldview, but for the time, maybe it was just realistic.
So what did people value in this world? It wasn't kindness or mercy. In these stories, those things are liabilities that will get you killed. What really mattered was cleverness. The ability to outwit your opponent, whether it's a witch, a dwarf, or your next-door neighbor. Luck was always a wild card, but your survival usually depended on being smarter, and often more ruthless than everybody else.
And that leaves us with one final, kind of unsettling question. We've sanitized these stories, right? We've turned them into safe, children's entertainment. But in doing that, have we lost the original message? By forgetting all this darkness, what warnings, coming to us from those deep, dark woods, have we failed to hear?